Hi, how are you? I'm Mr. Muso. Today we are revising, we are talking about Zimbabwean history. We are talking about what took place in Zimbabwe in 1898 up to 1980 when we attained our independence. So there is a question that we want to discuss today on colonial administration, the happenings, the events that occurred in Zimbabwe from 1890 up to 1980. So make sure your pen, make sure your notebook is close to you because we want to discuss a question on colonial administration. Here is the question. Analyze the plight of African laborers on African mines in southern Rhodesia between 1900 to 1945. That is our question. Let me repeat the question once again. Analyze the plight of African laborers on farms, mines in southern Rhodesia between 1900 to 1945. So we want to analyze the problems of African laborers, the problems that were faced by workers, the problems that were faced by different people who were working on farms and mines in southern Rhodesia in our country between 1900 to 1945. So let's start by underlining the key words. Which are our keywords on this question? Our keywords are analyze. So underline the term analyze, underline the term plight of African laborers. Plight, we are talking about problems. African, you're talking about the Shona and the Bele laborers, you're talking about the workers. Then underline the term farms, underline the term mines, underline the term southern Rhodesia between 1900 to 1945. So these are our key words. So we are going to divide our question into two parts. The first part, we are going to talk about the challenges, the problems that were faced by the African workers. Then on the other side, we talk about the other factors, what the Africans did, although they faced these problems, but they reacted. They had to do something. What did they do when they were working on farms and also mines that were possessed by the whites? So that is what we are going to discuss today on this question. So let's start with point number one on the problems, on the challenges that were faced by the Africans in farms and also mines between 1900 to 1945. Number one, these workers, they worked for long hours. They worked for long hours. For example, you could start work early in the morning around 6, 7, then up to 8, 9 in the evening. So they worked for long hours. They were subjected to long working hours. That brought problems. It brought frustrations. It brought anger. Why? It is because they were made to work for long working hours. So that was a problem in that they had to face serious challenges working for long working hours. Number two, you talk about the issue of taxation. They were made to pay taxes. They were supposed to pay taxes to the whites. It was a challenge in the sense that they were facing challenges. Their wages, their salaries were below poverty line, and here now they are made to pay taxes. So that brought anger. It brought frustrations. Why? It is because they were made to pay taxes despite the challenges, despite the problems that they were facing at their workplaces. The whites were not they were not worried about those challenges that they were facing. What they wanted were the taxes that these people were supposed to pay. So the payment of taxes was a challenge that was faced by these people at their workplaces. Number three, you also talk about low wages, low salaries. Their salaries, their wages, they were below poverty line. They worked for long hours, like what we've said, but come now here on salaries, we see that these salaries, they were below poverty datum line. So that on its own, it angered them, it brought frustrations. So it was a problem that was faced by laborers, by workers at the workplaces of the Africans, at the workplaces of the Europeans. Another problem was that they were exposed to harsh conditions. The conditions that they were exposed to, they were harsh, they were brutal, they were horrible. Why? It is because the whites were not interested in the upkeep or in the improving the ways of life of these people. They worked for long hours, severe conditions that they were experiencing. So because of these harsh conditions that they were experiencing, we see so many of them dying, so many of them now quitting, so many of them are running away, so many of them abandoning their workplaces. Why? It is because of the harsh conditions that they were experiencing at their workplaces. Then you also talk about another problem that the laborers experienced at their farms and mines was that they did not have good education facilities. The issue of poor education, they were not in a position of getting a good education. So that was a problem in the sense that they also wanted to be educated like their fellow whites, but they were not in a position of being educated like their fellow whites. So as a result of that, now it became a problem in the sense that they were not in a position of receiving a good education. Another problem that they experienced was that of poor accommodation. There was poor accommodation. They stayed in poor ventilated rooms. They stayed in large numbers in a single room. So many people staying in one single room. So that on its own, it was a challenge. It was a problem in the sense that it brought frustrations in the sense that they were not housed properly. The accommodation that they were given was not it was not good for them. So you also talk about a poor accommodation. Then there was also a problem of poor health facilities. They could get sick. They were not attended fully. Why? It is because there were no hospitals close to where they were staying. There were no hospitals close to where they were working. So that on its own, it became a problem in the sense that they were deprived of good health facilities. Good health facilities, they were only experienced, they were only found at the places where the whites were staying. So that on its own, it became a problem. Then you also talk about the pass system. They were supposed to move with them. They were supposed to carry with them a pass. Whenever they moved, they were supposed to be having a pass, moving with a pass, carrying with them a pass. That was brutality. That was cruelty. Why? It is because they were no longer free to go to any areas where they wanted to go. They were no longer free to visit any areas that they wanted to visit. Why? It was because they were subjected to passes. And whenever you were caught without a pass, now you were punished, you were beaten, you were brutalized. By so doing now, we see that it was a problem, it was a serious challenge that was faced by these workers at the workplaces where they were working. Then there was also a problem of the compound system, combone. We see that the whites had to build the compound system. They started the compound system in which people were supposed to stay at a combone. So we are staying there, you were supposed to work there, and we were supposed to stay there. So the conditions at the combone were so horrible again. Usually there was a single tap for about so many people. About 20, 30 people are using one tap. 20, 30 people using one toilet. That on its own, it was a challenge again. It brought anger, it brought frustrations to these people. And it explains why possibly the second Chimbrenga took place. Why? It is because of these poor conditions that they were experiencing at their compounds where they were staying. So the issue of the compound system again, it brought anger, brought frustrations again, leading these Africans to rebel later on the second Achemurenga. So you talk about the issue of the compound system. So because of that now, we see that Africans, it clearly shows that they face so many problems at their workplaces. They face so many challenges at their workplaces. We've talked about long hours. We've talked about the issue of taxation, issue of taxes. We've talked about the issue of low wages. We've talked about the harsh conditions. We've talked about poor education, poor accommodation, poor health facilities, the pass system. You also talk about the issue of forced labor. They were forced to work by the whites. Whites had to use force so that the Africans could work for them. You also talk about the compound system. So roughly we have talked about 10 points, which clearly shows that Africans face serious problems, severe problems at the workplaces where they were working. Let's move on and talk about the other side of the question. So when they faced these problems now, they were in a position of demonstrating or striking. So we see demonstrations, we see strikes becoming the order of the day. Why? Because the Africans were not pleased about what they were experiencing, about the problems that they were facing. So as a result of that, now we see demonstrations, we see strikes are taking place at farms, at mines, where these Africans are worked. Some also had to to go slow, doing a job, a work which was supposed to be done in an hour. You could spend 5 hours or more than 5 hours doing that work. So they had to go slow, using go slows, showing that they were not pleased about the the conditions which they were experiencing where they were working. Some also went on to forge passes. Some also went to vandalize property. Property was vandalized. Why was it vandalized now? It is because they were not pleased about the conditions that they were experiencing at their workplaces. So we talk about these on the other side of the question. So on the other side of the question, we can talk about 45 paragraphs. We talked about issue of strikes, demonstrations, issue of ghost laws, issue of vandalism, and also talk about forging passes. They had to forge passes so that they could run away, so that they could flee where they were working. So it's another way that they to use show to show that they were not pleased about what was taking place at their workplaces. So that is how we answer this question. Let me repeat that question again.